going back to some of the work that Bernard Eastland was doing when he invented HAARP, that whole system was predicated on huge amounts of energy being available for manipulating weather formations. And what Eastland discovered in 2004, 2005, a couple years before he died, was the idea that HAARP could manipulate what are called gravitational waves, which he believed were the root of weather systems, using energy 1/1600th of the energy he originally thought was needed. In other words, just a small fraction of energy was needed to manipulate gravitational waves that then would have this cascading reaction through geophysical systems, including weather systems. And that research he actually presented when I was working as executive director of the Lay Institute. We had Dr. Eastland in Dallas for a conference on mind effects, and one of the things that he talked about, of course, was HAARP and some of its applications, particularly in this area of weather modification.
From your deep research, I know you've gone through that HAARP is multifaceted, over-the-horizon radar-type systems, weather modification. I mean, really, it's an array of things. But when you talk about gravitational waves, it's interesting. Fox News and others are pointing out that meteorologist, climatologist Piers Corbin, who we've had on before, stunningly can predict the weather with many times more accuracy than these big so-called computer models, because he focuses on gravitational waves, and he goes back to the multi-hundred-year-old science where the old-timers didn't know why, but it was connected to the moon changing, and they didn't know what the action was then. They just knew that when the moon was in certain cycles, it was doing certain things. Now they know that it's the moon causing different gravitational events, but also shielding the Earth, or exposing the Earth more to the solar winds of different ionizing particles. So there's a lot of things within the Earth, without the Earth, that are driving weather, the science shows, more than what mainline global warming type kook scientists say. And they know this too. They just want to ignore it and claim that humans exhaling carbon dioxide is causing it. So A, what is HAARP really? B, I've seen the reports that there are really HAARP centers all over the world. They just call them other things. And then C, could this be connected to the increase in earthquakes?
It could be. Let's go for the first thing. There are many facilities that have phased arrays, radio frequency transmitters designed like HAARP. HAARP is the acronym for this specific project, but these arrays exist in several locations around the world, including the former Soviet Union, Canada, throughout Europe. The Chinese even have one at Antarctica. So, that it's pretty widespread in terms of that. The technology and what HAARP is designed for is manipulating the ionosphere, changing this layer above the Earth's surface that is so responsible in large part for the quality and character of communications, for the fact that we have biological life even on this planet. And using energy essentially as the base of this system to alter the geophysics of the planet, the things that actually make the planet run and work. So think about it as sort of a man-made component shoved on the machine of Earth to change its character in certain respects and the way it works, using energy itself. And so when you think about sort of the direction in which this science has taken us, it's not just about HAARP. It's this whole revolution in military affairs. And I know you've talked to your audience about before. This RMA includes a whole class of weapons and technologies, of which HAARP is really just a very small part. It's just the one part that happens to have gotten a good bit of notoriety, because we sort of attacked that as one very fine example of where this technology is going. And more importantly, it is the largest radio transmitter of its kind ever designed and built in the world, and it presents huge challenges, particularly in the areas we're talking about today.
And of course, when we talk about this only being one component, we look at things like the Hadron Superconducting Super Collider, and just like 10, 15 years ago, they'd make fun of us if we even said HAARP existed. Now it's common knowledge. I read what the directors of Hadron have said. They've admitted, there's a small probability that this could create a strangelet or that a black hole could get purchased and actually get enough mass into it, but it's a low probability. But then that makes me go back to the 1950s and 60s, where the U.S. was detonating high-powered hydrogen bombs in the upper atmosphere, and they thought there was a good chance it might actually destroy the atmosphere, but they still did it. So when I see statements like that, I mean, what do you, I mean, I know there's no way to quantify it, but I mean, just from a layman, this looks like this could really damage the planet or even destroy our civilization.
Right. Well, you know, this is, again, where science kind of moves on and sort of forgets the rest of us in the background as if we didn't exist. And a lot of scientists are very incensed when lay people, the average person, starts to weigh in on their issues. They feel like it's sort of their exclusive domain and no one else is qualified. And the reality is, when you talk about effects of technologies, we're all qualified to weigh in. We may not be the engineers or designers, but that should not matter. And in this century, what we're doing with this technology is either going to make us free or make us slaves. And
we all should have a debate and have input on that. Stay there. Let's get into hadron. Let's get into other advanced technologies that you're concerned about. I also want to ask the question, why are so many of these HAARP programs, the Chinese and others, why are they near the poles? What's important about that?
Well, the unions are big businessmen, and they're going out like a dinosaur. Well, they used to grow food in Kansas, then they want to grow it on the moon and eat it raw. I can see the day coming when even your home gardener's gonna be against the
Dr. Begich doesn't put on airs, but he's been an expert to the European Union Parliament. He, of course, has been the president of both the Alaskan Federation of Teachers and the Anchorage City Council of Education. And I can get into his doctorate all day. His brother is a U.S. Senator. His father was was Nick Begich Sr. This is a short segment, long segment coming up. But, Doc, getting back into this, what are your concerns overall with something like the Hadron Superconducting Super Collider? And are there other technologies and other scientific operations that you're more concerned about?
Well, the risks associated with big science, you know, is there, and they even identified. I mean, the idea of creating a catastrophic event with this type of technology, again, this is why we need a little closer scrutiny, and I am actually more concerned about the things that we don't see. I mean, what we see in the open literature is certainly hair-raising in some cases and pretty disturbing in others. But what we do know is that the direction in which the technologies have moved is really more about how do you affect biological systems like human beings and other systems in a way where you can literally manipulate the players. I mean, when you think about military interventions, you know, and we're looking at it right now. You look at our budget on the rebuild on countries after we go in and annihilate them. It's pretty costly expense, and a lot of this is based on the idea that, hey, is there a better way? Is there a way to affect the human beings without tearing up their infrastructure so we have to rebuild it? And there is, and it's this direction in technologies that allows that possibility. And the difference is when you start to target the human being in this way, it is much, much different than bombs and bullets, and starts to raise the bigger kinds of questions of, you know, what's rational. I mean, we've said biological and chemical weapons are immoral, and yet weapons that affect in a much more profound way than chemicals aren't even restricted at all. And this, I think, is critically important, is the reactions of chemicals or chemical constituents that were so appalling in World War I have been replaced by electronic systems that essentially deliver the same kind of effects. So we're not talking about a different outcome. We're just talking about a different delivery system.
And to simplify it, you're talking about mind control. And I've seen the patents that you've covered.
Right.
I've looked at them at the patent office. I've seen articles in the Baltimore Sun where it goes,
right.
Oh, DARPA's looking at putting up towers to calm you during
right.
emergencies. And,
right.
and I mean, just like 10, 15 years ago, they'd make fun of us talking about HAARP. Now it's mainstream. Now more and more, They're like, we are going to put cameras everywhere to make sure that are AI and make sure you're behaving yourself in your house. We are going to mind control you. This is a brave new world. And so you talk about, for whatever bit of technology we see, there's an iceberg beneath that.
Right.
I mean, how much of this stuff do we even know about, Doc?
Very, very little, actually. What you see in the open literature is just a fragment, a grain of sand on the beach of knowledge, if you will. There's just so much more out there. When you look at the area of any of the areas that we've covered, from mind effects to weather effects, we've been covering them now over 15 years and consistently, and this is the true test, in my opinion. You go back to our original writings in 1994, and nothing has changed. You can look through those articles, those books, the materials we've produced, and we have not changed our opinion one iota. The facts that we identified then and the sources that we reference them, primarily government, military, and mainstream documents that were unclassified, nothing has happened to change our opinions, only to prove that we were correct. And you've experienced the same thing in a lot of your work. And the mainstream does eventually catch up, but usually it's sort of when the train has left the station and is already arriving somewhere else. That's where we are on this technology. And again, the idea of affecting weather systems, of affecting other forms of living organisms, including, the latest thing with the birds. Now we hear another situation in Louisiana, very similar to what was in Arkansas.
Europe?
Yep. And so there was a very interesting study, and this gets back to, people want to blame the chemistry. And I was in a conference in Brussels. It was a closed conference for a group called GLOBE, which is 44 governments, legislators. And in their 12th General Assembly in 1997, I attended, and the people that we were lecturing with on the other side was a group that had just written a book on chemicals creating false hormones in the environment. And I was talking with the guys from MIT and from Washington that were responsible for that. And the overlay is energy itself, because it triggers very bizarre chemical reactions.
That's right. Instead of putting chemicals in you, they can use harmonics or waves to make you produce it yourself. Stay there, Doctor. We'll be right back.
We now take you live
to the Central Texas Command Center
in the heart of the resistance. You're listening to The Alex Jones Show.
We are back live. Dr. Nick Begich riding shotgun with us. Honored to have him. We're going to go back to him in a moment. We're carrying 2 new films, one of which I produced. One illustrates the political rulers of this planet and their open call to set up a global planetary dictatorship for the orderly population reduction of at least 80% of the planet. And then a scientific dictatorship over the 500 million that remain. So we know they've built this system and are accelerating its completion, and we know that they do not have our interest at heart. That is covered in the film Invisible Empire, A New World Order Defined, Jason Bermas's excellent work, available at Infowars.com. And then this film, what in the world are they spraying, getting into now so many of the public admissions of the geoengineering? Just what the researchers 15, 16, 17 years ago said, aluminum dioxide, barium salt. Turns out that's exactly what they are spraying. The patents for mixing it in the jet fuel, you name it. It is What in the World Are They Spraying? All available at the online video bookstore of Infowars.com. And they are discounted. I might add for you. You can also call toll-free 888-253-3139, 888-253-3139, or write to us, P.O. Box 19549, Austin, Texas 78760.